good day to all our speakers, participants, viewers, listeners from around the world. My name is Shilpa Phadke and I'm your event anchor today. As we enter day 3 of the Asia Economic Dialogue 2023, I want to take a moment to thank all of our distinguished guests who engaged with us on this platform over the past couple of days. We have been witnessing very informative, substantive discussions and conversations thanks to all of you. I have no doubt that our speakers today will further enrich the dialogues over the course of their sessions. We begin with an entirely virtual session, appropriately on Metaverse, led by Dr. Ganesh Natarajan, who is a trustee of the Pune International Center and is executive chairman and founder 5F World. Joining him are Mr. Rajan Navni, founder, Jet Synthesis, India, Mr. Chow Nguyen, partner, McKinsey Singapore, and Mr. Akshay Gautam, chief consultant, Graffiti IO. I welcome you all to this forum and ask Dr. Natarajan to take over, please. Thank you.
Sure. Thank you, Shilpa, and a very good morning. I think on what's obviously turning out to be an extremely exciting Asia Economic Dialogue. And I was, happy to be there on the opening day in person and now on Zoom. And I'm truly excited about this session. And this session actually came up as an idea that we were tossing around between Ambassador Bambawale and Dr. Mashelkar. And we said that, look, we must look at, when you're looking at, could this be the decade of India and the century of Asia, that what is it that we're doing in terms of exciting new technologies that might further accelerate the way we lead in various areas. And for that, we were looking at absolutely the right people. So I'm delighted to say that we have Chow. Of course, Chow is a partner in McKinsey based out of Singapore, and he is an absolute expert on the whole topic of Metaverse. And Rajan Navani, to my mind, one of the best practitioners of all things for Gen Z and all things for the future in this country, Jet Synthesis. And every time I meet him, he kind of transports me into an immersive new world. So hopefully we'll do that also in the next 55 minutes. And we're also expecting Akshay Gautam to join us. Akshay is a young entrepreneur from Delhi who has just started working in Metaverse, and he has some very exciting work that he's already doing. So that's the broad parameters. And just to kick it off, I think all of you know that Metaverse, was actually brought into the forefront by people like Mark Zuckerberg actually talking about it and talking about building entire companies like Meta around Metaverse. And my own experience with the alternate reality, if you will, was nearly 15 years ago, I think 12 or 15 years ago, when I was running this company, Zensar Technologies. And there was something called Second Life, which was happening in those days. And I remember we set up an entire virtual campus of Zensar in Second Life. And people could wander into the campus wearing whatever wolf avatar or whatever you have, and could ask questions. And one morning, in fact, one of my human resource people said, look, something exciting is happening on Second Life. And I went out there and there was this guy dressed as a wolf who was engaging in asking very intelligent questions on the platform. And very, very intelligent, very incisive in terms of what could be the future, etc. So we invited him, why don't you come and interview with us and join our company? And he said, oops, where's that? So we said, this is where we are in Pune, why don't you come physically? And next morning he showed up and he actually became one of the best human resource people in our organization. So I was one of the most devastated when Second Life, because of inadequate funding, couldn't scale. And I'm also the most excited today that we can really see something significant happening, which can not only change the way we think about reality. Many of you would have been followers of quantum physics and Vedanta philosophy, etc. Everything is about the observer sees what is his reality. And I think to a large extent, I think we're going to see Metaverse also giving us those alternate realities. So with that kind of intriguing introduction, let me tell you how we'll run this session. We're going to first ask Chow to talk about what, from a consultant's point of view, he sees as Metaverse today, tomorrow, and the future. And then, of course, we'll have our entrepreneurs really talking about how they're experiencing and how they would expect that you would experience Metaverse. Chow, over to you, sir.
Thank you very much, Dr. Natarajan, and good morning, everyone. Very pleased to be with you here today. In the truest sense of the consulting world, I do have a few slides to help us guide us through the storytelling. So let me just share the screen right now. I hope you can see the screen. So basically, my name is Chow Nguyen. I'm a partner at McKinsey based out of Singapore. And let me first start by saying that let's level ourselves up on what is the metaverse. And there is a lot of conflicting definition, but in our perspective, put simply, it is an evolution of today's internet. It is, the internet is something that we kind of observe and interact via a screen, to something that with the metaverse, we can be deeply immersed and engage in the content. And by that, I think the intriguing aspect of the metaverse in our kind of perspective in the longer term is that it is fundamentally a human experience, right? When we think about the interactions of information, the way that we engage with content, the way we engage with our world, it is this seamless continuum, stretching from physical reality to all the interactive surfaces and devices, wearables, and full immersion in virtual reality. So in a way, I think the value proposition of the metaverse is not just in the virtual reality that you can only kind of experience when you wear a goggle, but you leave a lot of value on the table if you don't actually deliver solutions that engages people throughout their life in real life. So therefore, for us, the metaverse spans this entire continuum. And let me share this video of ABBA. Who among us doesn't love ABBA? But this is a concert. It's a fully digital concert, right, with a live band, and it shows you the one way that this immersiveness of shared experience with each other are now modernized, where ABBA, in their 70s, are actually performing in their prime, right? In high definition human avatars, in lifelike avatars, with full immersive, sound, audio, lighting, super engaging. I went to this concert myself in London, right? So this is one way that I guess the definition of the metaverse can really truly extend in our life. And how did they do that? They actually scanned ABBA. They motion captured ABBA. They built the most human, the most realistic human avatars ever created in the most sophisticated, using industrial light and magic, the same makers of all the Star Wars and special effects. So they're in their 70s. They can now sit back at home while their concerts playing all the time. And this virtualization, now they have the assets of virtualizing ABBA in way more context than just a real life concert. They can be in any environment now in years to come, right? And not only that, brands are also experimenting, right? Brands are experimenting that are crossing across these seamless kind of reality to virtual reality. Here we have an ad campaign by Lay's potato chips and Subway. They built, they created this one-off, jacket, puffer jacket on the left there. They created then an augmented reality, wearable that are popularized on Snapchat. So kids of today, Gen Z, they're basically live capturing themselves wearing a virtual jacket. The same jacket is then sold as an NFT as a wearable on your virtual avatar that you can go into Decentraland, as a virtual world. So these kinds of seamlessness is what is now being experimented heavily by lots and lots of brands, and it is conditioning the youth of today to really very normalized kind of experience in terms of this physical, virtual and augmented kind of digital assets like this, right? Now, you may have heard, that the metaverse hype has kind of died down, and true, right? This is the Google search trend that kind of peaked when Mark Zuckerberg kind of announced the Meta's transition to focus on the metaverse around kind of October, November. That really kicked off this hype cycle. Right now, it's kind of more in a steady state, so the hype actually was over this time last year, right? In the end of January or so, the hype is already down, which is a very good news because what is happening now is that we are, a lot of the metaverse companies and technologists are now very focused on building the infrastructure of tomorrow. Now, even though the general population hype of the metaverse has cooled down, the engagement factor of the most successful metaverse platform today, Roblox, has never waned, right? It has never waned. And in fact, its daily active user numbers has actually increased, right? And this is a significant signal of how the generation of the future are engaging with the metaverse, and why there's a lot of learned lessons on how Roblox is very successful with gamification as a core part of their delivery, with the ability to create worlds, simple, even kids can actually build their own game and their own world to invite others to come in and interact. And now you have mega brands like Walmart, Nike, all having their worlds within this platform itself, right? Now, we're definitely over the hype bump. The reality is that to really get to that end state of the metaverse, there's a lot of building to do, right? And these are the kind of key things that has to be there for the true, immersive, persistent, interoperable metaverse of the future. That requires a significant amount of engineering, software development, and the like, and there's no shortage of investment still to this day in terms of where that is going. So if you think about the opportunities of the metaverse of tomorrow, we believe that there are opportunities throughout the layers of the metaverse. There are infrastructure level, there are components level, there are interoperable level, not just the experiential level, right? So there are lots and lots of layers that there are room to play for players that focus on a particular niche area, or for players that traverses the verticals of some of these things. And it is already a massively busy marketplace. And you can see this 57 categories of the metaverse, of the 10 layers of metaverse. There is a huge amount of investment that are still going on to really now solve those kind of immersiveness, persistency, and interoperability that I mentioned before. That is where it's going to really be the economic kind of fabric of the metaverse of the future, right? And last year we did our report that we can project that there's going to be around 4 to 5 trillion USD value potential in the metaverse by 2030. And there are signals that are still strong today in terms of uptake and continued investment, even though the general kind of media hype is kind of died down, right? But to put a bit of a reality check, we are, similar to the internet evolution with Roblox today. We are similarly when America Online was a dominant place to go in the internet of the mid-90s. So I think there is still some room for us to get there, right? Now at McKinsey, we looked at trends and really trying to predict and analyze the probable futures. And by really studying all these signals and trends, we are able to come up with a number of insights and uncertainties, of which when we actually intersect them, we develop these kind of future scenario. I'm just, in the interest of time, I'm just sharing, 4 interesting kind of scenario when we think about the uncertainties of, in the future, where you have really high immersion or low immersion because of the slow kind of uptake of technology, and then when we cross that with governance, right, where you have effective governance to insufficient governance. So we can see that, we have 4 potential scenarios, even just by comparing these 2 simple uncertainty pairs, where the modern agora, right, I start with the Wild West, right, where there's high immersion but insufficient governance. There's a lot of low regulation that creates quite a every man for himself kind of experience. The immersive experience will attract a lot of risk takers, but it's also fertile ground for a lot of exploitation as well. So that could be one kind of potential scenario in the near future or the distant future. The modern agora, on the other hand, with effective governance and high immersion, it could be, what we could be the new Greek agora. It's a center of, really artistic, business, social, and spiritual even development, where people are basically developing new human experiences, both online and offline, enabled by metaverse technology. right? And you can see the other two, scenarios when we cross these things where there could be, with low immersion, insufficient government. Well, it's a bit of a more of a fad, and it'll be an empty field with not a lot of uptake, with an increasingly risky environment, for example.
From Singapore.
Yeah.
KPMGs. Huh?
Hey, Gautam, you have to be on mute.
Sorry about that. Yeah. So
Sorry.
So these scenarios, there are lots and lots of these things, and we're continuing to look at the various signals and trends to really trying to anticipate, what would be the eventual thing. It's very hard to predict to this day. But what we are seeing is a tremendous amount of experimentation. And these experiments are going to have learned lessons in terms of how to engage end users from their experience across play, live, and work. And I think it's looking very quite amazing, actually, the amount of experimentations going on, and not just from small startup and boutique brands, but even Google, has it really lifted their game in terms of immersiveness through a simple, ubiquitous map, application. This was launched like 2 weeks ago, and now you're able to really totally immerse yourself in cities, in restaurants and bars and things like that, where you can actually go inside and have a complete three-dimensional immersive experience of extremely high fidelity. So this is the signs of things to come in terms of constantly being immersed in digital data, digital representation of our world or virtual world, right? And this is what future consumers are gonna, expect. And more recently, Qatar, World Cup, and we can see that. And these are little signals that are happening every day that slowly but surely are allowing us to engage with our world better. So this application, FIFA Plus, if you're at the match itself, you use your phone, you scan the pitch, it will automatically detect which game you're looking at, which player is running and where, and you can click on that player. You get all the data and information to be much more engaged, right? You can see how fast they accelerate, where have they run, and the coverage and things. So these kind of layers of information and experiences is what are the future of what consumers of the future are going to expect. So in summary, really the opportunities of the metaverse is really realized by enhancing these real life experiences as much as engaging in creating these immersive virtual world, because there's a lot of value on the physical reality that we live and exist. Because really, at the end of the day, the most successful metaverses experienced today are those that are creating true engagement, connectedness with your friends, your family, to places, to brands, right? Without that level of engagement in our real world, it's not going to be quite a, it could be quite a dystopia kind of place, and no one would want that, right? So let me leave it there, and I really look forward to really unpacking some of these thoughts with you all in the next 45 minutes or more. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Chao. I think that was a wonderful tour of the world of Metaverse. And I'm just hoping that when you do not the ABBA Voulez-Vous, but you do Dancing Queen, you'll send me a copy. I'd love to have my favorite song in Metaverse. And I'm also glad you mentioned that in Gartner speak, Mark Zuckerberg's statements actually took it to the peak of the hype cycle. And as we all know, people who are working in technology, we then lead into a trough of disillusionment, if you will. And then there is the slope of enlightened growth. And I think what both you and I'm sure Rajan also will say is that we are looking at that slope of enlightened growth coming up, and serious brands, as you rightly mentioned, will make that happen. One quick question to you, Chao, before I move to Rajan, which is that, we all know that in the last year, there has been some level of decline. For instance, even artificial intelligence, which is one of the key enablers of Metaverse, which is seen, potentially going to be a $15 trillion almost alternate economy by itself, has kind of come down from 150 billion to about 70-75 billion. And similarly, the two great technologies that were so hyped sometime back, augmented reality and virtual reality, I think they've come down from whatever 20 billion to 5 billion. So is this a natural consequence of COVID, or do you think that the use, the killer app in Metaverse will make many of these applications or technologies also grow much better?
I think some of these core technologies in AR, XR is extremely difficult to overcome in terms of barrier of overcome economics, economy of scale in terms of the technology required. It's still immature, so it takes a lot of R&D investment. And right now, in the macroeconomic condition, companies are investing in different ways. So there is a bit of a slowdown, but it is also because of the long development cycles that some of these breakthrough technologies kind of needed. I don't think that it will go on a significant pause. I think every order of leap in these kinds of paradigm shift, it does take about a decade or more to get to a kind of a mature level. All we can see is like the signals in the consumer space of engagement in platforms that are ubiquitous, that are designed for laptops, designed for mobile phones. This, I think, is going to be the next 3 to 5 years are the platform, right? The wearables are going to take a longer time to get to ubiquity. And right now, the most successful kind of solution provider, they're purely focused on accessibility, like designing Metaverse for accessibility, not for a niche kind of hardware devices like VR and AR. Yeah.
Got it. I think that's great. So let me segue to Rajan and get your view, Rajan. So first, can you talk to us about something that both of us are really excited about, the whole Web 3.0? And for a more general audience, can you just explain the Web 1.0 to 2.0 to 3.0? And then talk about what makes you excited about Metaverse. I still remember we had a board meeting in your office. And once you started talking about Metaverse, we forgot what we were meeting in the board for, and everybody wanted to know more about it. So maybe just some thoughts from you initially, and then we'll move to the discussions. Go ahead.
Thanks, Ganesh, and I'll keep that focused on that subject and really just touch upon it. But again, thank you for having me here, and Gautam and Kamashilkar and others also. Congratulations on a great dialogue. Very interesting, Chao, the way you set the tonality. But to Ganesh, your point, so that we can make one step back. I think the excitement around Metaverse really has come from the fact that the world has actually started to look at the internet generations, as a Web 1, Web 2.0, and a Web 3 generation. And I think what started as a one-way information kind of a journey several decades ago expanded into how people could really, create websites and, make sure that they were able to transact using the internet. And I think there were companies and others who use the internet and Web 2 particularly to build a better reach for their businesses, to be able to communicate to larger audiences, and even to sell their goods, across, e-commerce kind of experiences. But then there were very large businesses built on Web 2. So today, if you see Facebook, you see, Google, you see Amazon, they all use the Web 2.0 to build large businesses that are today the most valuable businesses in the world and will continue to probably dominate, the advancement of technology for some time to come. And I think the shift in Web 3 is pretty much a large shift like what happened between Web 1 and Web 2, where today the ability to be able to have ownership in a digital world has changed everything, because the underlying technology of blockchain really enables one to have a very robust economy that can not only support transactions of various kinds in a more transparent and in a decentralized manner, but most importantly, actually give value to that asset in a digital world. And I think that is what has changed a large part of what Web3 is. And when you combine that, with where the Gen Zs and the new age digital natives really are looking at their future, both from a livelihood as well as from a consumption area, I think it's one crazy, kind of a mix that is emerging today. And I think that really, to me, is what will trigger, this entire speak that we talk about, the digital economy, the digital goods economy will be driven in the future a lot by individuals, content creators, community managers, and even brands need to find ways in which they can engage with these audiences who are also going to be their future consumers. Now, where will these communities exist and how will they really drive different aspects of our lives is really what is exciting about the metaverse today. So typically what will happen is, I think all the technologies, Ganesh, you talked of, right? AI and augmented reality, all of them are actually at a very strong interplay here in Web3, along with an underlying stable, blockchain kind of a network, which is so robust that eventually even today a currency can be, built on it. So I think this shift that we are seeing, right, the ability to own in the digital world, in the virtual world, then the ability to, transact for the future. So you can sell and trade assets. You have the ability to remarket the same assets again as needed, I think is going to drive a large part of the metaverse engagement also, as we see it happening. So our take is that there will be a large opportunity, not only in the building blocks of metaverse, which Chow kind of mentioned when it comes to interoperability, interactivity, infrastructure, but a very large part of that will also be driven by consumer experiences that have already started to take shape. I think what will really define the future of metaverse in the world to a very large extent is going to be how does the global regulatory market really look at that. And we've seen some of those challenges play out. And really that requires a global conversation. And therefore, I'm glad that you've raised this subject at a platform like this. I think today, after the pandemic, governments and others have started to look inwards, right? Because you want to see how your countries will continue to, do well in a very uncertain world. But I think what is really going to be required is a lot more multilateral conversations around, issues like this, or at least areas like this, which will strongly define the future of not only, countries, but also the citizens of the world. And that's what, again, I think is going to be something that we need to find ways to do that. And, having said that, Ganesh, I'll just talk a little bit about, the journey and why we feel India is also a right country when it comes to the metaverse innovation. Because not only do we have a very strong Gen Z population, we all know that 375 million people in that age bracket born after 1995, digital natives. And we've been seeing how large part of that community is actually engaging and spending their time, in areas that really not only align with their passions, but something that we always talk of passion leading to the opportunities for how they will generate their livelihoods, in the future. And I think the talent pool in India is great to be able to deliver some of these solutions. I think there is a lot of interest in terms of evolving technologies that are happening out of India. And somewhere I do feel that Asia and India will have a large say in this, the play out of the metaverse as we look at it, especially when we look at the world as a global hub, and where will the markets also come from. So there was a strong understanding at our end that this will play out, and that's why we continue to build in that space. Having built ecosystems in gaming and esports, which are again digital natives, and where we really see people engaging passionately. Like sometimes we will say 8 hours 36 minutes, that's not a number of the hours of sleep, but that's really the number of hours a week that people spend in building their expertise in a sport that is linked on a digital device. So it's not really something that we are talking of, it's just a casual entertainment, but it requires a very different level of fitness, a very different level of commitment to be able to create that. Now, all of these are done virtually, right? And having built, these ecosystems for India and globally, I think what appealed to us was that how do we take our understanding of building virtual worlds, of engaging virtual consumers, of being able to sell virtual goods and expand that into, the real world. So I think the excitement is how does the physical world, and the extended world come together, and in what shapes and forms, right? I think we launched one of the world's first, music NFTs. We've done a lot of things when it comes to how do you really look at, areas in esports and in, digital assets in gaming, where there are very clear opportunities for players to even earn while they're playing. So there are different ways in which people are using this entire experience to be able to expand their entire aspect of livelihood. And I think that's, again, a big driver. Coming to immersiveness, I think in India, right? While we will see, and what I think Chow really demonstrated through some of the videos, India will still be a largely smartphone-led, metaverse experience, at least for the next few years, until VR headsets and other experiences become real and affordable. And we've seen that happen across, the play in many, many other advanced technologies over this period of time. And we are therefore, looking at how does the metaverse experience from an Indian context, of course, with 5G coming up, with smartphones there, how do you build that bridge for the next 3 to 4 years before we really get into a deeply immersive experience? And I think that journey is also something that is very live and active, Ganesh. Even today, even though there has been a slowdown in many of these areas, we do see a lot of brands, a lot of companies now looking at creating not only their own metaverse experiences for their consumers, but now actually transactions beginning to happen in that space. And the last point that I want to say before, and then we'll make this conversational, as you said, is that the belief in the future of metaverse also comes from the fact that, I think by 2030 or 2025, 27% of the global workforce will also be Gen Zs, right? So they are the ones who will be shaping their companies and their businesses of the future. And I was mentioning earlier, when we talk of India and its future and, Amrit Kal in the next 25 years, we also have to include the Gen Alphas and the Gen Betas. These are people born in 2010 and people who are not even born yet. And in some discussions, we always talk of how do we create a world where they will feel comfortable coming into and also help shape it, very differently in the future. So, as Jet Synthesis, since you said, we look at gaming, esports, we look at music, entertainment, but we also look at areas that are going to be critical and important. And I think Chow talked about spirituality and, wellness, and really how do you bring mindfulness at the fore. And it's so driven by India, right? We always talk world is an illusion, this is all Maya. But these people who will, the young gen that comes in actually transitions between worlds that are artificial, that is real, and there is a strong ability to be able to distinguish between some of these things. So there's a large opportunity for self-development and being able to use that as an experience to be able to navigate your life. So I think there are many, many aspects to wellness, to the way you can, think about preventive health, the way you can think of livelihoods, etc., that will be shaped through a large part of these experiences. And these will be real, I think, to the next gen. And I think what we find very exciting is that, their ability to naturally use this as a medium to be able to drive their future is far more visible today than ever before. And I think we will see this, play out pretty aggressively over the next few years. The good part is it has toned down because that, we were talking earlier, the FOMO effect has kind of died down. People are now building much stronger bases for the industry. And I think that will help shape a large part of the future as well on a much stronger and deeper foundation. And that too makes this more exciting.
That's awesome, Rajan. But let me push you to give us a real story. I mean, imagine there is some girl, call her Aditi, growing up somewhere in India. And 6 years later, maybe 2030, which is what we all think about in terms of what India can do. And if we have to really see how that happens, and sorry, my video just went off. But if we have to look at Aditi in 2020, what is her typical life? I mean, if you look at 9 a.m. till 9 p.m., is she more on metaverse? Is she more on real? Is she completely confused? What do you see her happening to her?
Well, it's interesting because, for them, the world will be one, right? I mean, if you really look at the metaverse, how we are defining it very differently from the real world, and we are trying to distinguish between different worlds, it will be one world, right? And how much time you're spending in one world versus the other will only be based on really what kind of activities you're pursuing and where you're doing it. So if I'm deriving my entire livelihood in a metaverse, I'm spending 8 hours of my working life there. If I'm imbibing my mindfulness exercise, not out of taking a walk in nature, but actually feeling nature, in a virtual world, which drives and triggers me in a far, better manner, That's where I will be. But it will be an interoperable world, I would say, for someone at that age. And McKinsey Chow is here. He said, meta commerce is going to be $2.5 trillion by 2030. Am I right? That was the number that McKinsey came up with. So you're going to see a large part of their, their buying habits, their consumption also happening, between the two worlds, right? And I think that's where we are all looking at what will define that, and how do, therefore, responsible industry players over this entire period build different kind of aspects of this universe to enable that to happen in a more intuitive manner. I think what Chow was also referring to, the accessibility, how do you get in to different aspects. Today with health, like our metaverse offering in health, Ganesh, there's no wearable, right? You just look at your mobile screen and we give you about 140 parameters of your health, including your blood pressure, and then say, hey, why don't you do this meditation now? Why would you not go and do this next? Why don't you do this next piece there? And I think that kind of a experience that you're going to see is probably going to be far more critical for those audiences on making decisions as to where and how they will spend their time.
No, that's very interesting, Rajan. And I think we're all looking forward to that time when you rightly said, whether it's the Gen X or the Gen Y or the Gen Z or whichever gens of the future, we're all able to kind of seamlessly interact and not be limited by technology or whatever. But Chow, question to you. You clearly handle all of Asia in your various consulting activities, and you told me that you're on your way to Saudi Arabia. So what is the advantage that you think young populations in Asia have in terms of really leading the frontiers of metaverse for the next maybe 10, 15 years? What do you see as Asia's natural advantages?
I think potentially there's a number of things. One is the frequency and the adaptiveness of what they are currently doing in terms of their consumption habit. For example, Asia has the largest gaming population, right, compared to Europe and the US. It has probably the largest kind of online video media consumption or social media kind of thing per capita. So these kinds of consumptive habits of engaging with digital mediums through various means and the natural ability to interact more globally, the openness in which they're absorbing, external cultures as well, right? I think is far more pronounced than in other parts of the world. I think young people in the US, for example, they probably don't consume as much of Asian culture as young people in Asia consuming American and European culture, for example. So therefore, I think the advantage of having this kind of worldly connectedness and empathy for cross-cultural, cross-border interaction is much more heightened. I was born in Vietnam. I grew up in Australia. I work in Singapore and throughout Asia. I find that Asia is actually quite a much more metropolitan melting pot of cultures. Even in Singapore here, and that to me is quite a phenomenal strength, position of strength that our kids, our younger generation, are growing up in. Right, that they have these kinds of exposure. The other dimension I feel is that I think the Asian work ethics and the ability to be extremely resourceful with the means that you have at your disposal to be innovative, to develop and build things are actually has always been an advantage and will continue to be an advantage because it is always coming from a resource kind of starved kind of environment. And the yearning to actually do more with what you have, and I think that driver is part of the DNA, I feel, right, of a lot of Asian young generation that they actually carry forward with them, right? I mean, you can see the how many significant Indian-born leaders of the tech companies in the US, right? And you can see what that whole trajectory on how that has happened. So I think the cultural infusion and adaptivity the kind of penchant for innovation with limited resources. I think these are the two really strong pillars of distinctiveness, I feel. Yeah.
No, that's amazing, and not to forget that Ajay Banga is also going to become the head of the World Bank. So
yeah,
now we are moving beyond tech and capabilities, I guess. So Rajan, let me put you on the spot. I mean, here I am in Maklaskiganj, and you just noticed my lights all went off for 3 minutes. So while we keep talking about great technology, is there a risk? I mean, we all know that the National Optic Fiber Network and what Prime Minister Modi has announced, and of course, it's been there for quite some time in various forms. But we still have a last mile problem to a certain extent, because if you look at the 250,000 gram panchayats and the 600,000 plus villages, not everybody has equal access to technology. I mean, today, as I said, I was pleasantly surprised that I can even do this session. And if you remember 2 days ago, I requested you that if I completely fail to log in, please conduct the session, because you never know in India that we always worry about technology. So will it create a further digital divide? Will we have the haves and have-nots separated by access to 5G and access to quantum computing? So is that an issue that you worry about, that look, we have to develop a homogeneous layer of technology to make sure that entities like Metaverse can be successful?
No, I think it's definitely a concern that we should be discussing. As I said, it requires a much deeper level of understanding by multiple stakeholders, right? Because this is something like when you're talking of a tier 2, how do you really make digital work for inclusion, for affordability, and all of that, which has happened. So if I look at the past, right, that same fear that we had, Ganesh, has actually now added a lot more value, right? And creating public infrastructure stacks in digital, at least India has led the way, started with finance, then, health, and now agriculture, what we heard. So I think, when you have these tech stacks, I think new technologies automatically become a part of the future roadmap. And I feel that the access to different, endpoints will actually work better, for a country particularly as large as India. So I think it will build more inclusion rather than, expand the digital divide over the longer term or medium term. Short term, yes, I think we got to be a lot more, mindful of that. And therefore, when I talked about India, I said, there is a Web 2.5. There is an intermediate immersive way, which will have to be smartphone led, because I think that adoption has happened at massive scale today, right? How do we therefore use that as the base, to say this is the base level for a country like India? Where Metaverse will get challenged is, concurrency issues, right? Now think about, are you having a smooth experience for a very large concurrent base, right? Despite what we do with 5G, 6G, deeper engagements. And I know that will only push the curve, right, really to make that happen faster and sooner. But let's face it, today it is restrictively expensive to build all of this infrastructure. It requires a different level of approach, in terms of, capital allocation, because if private industry has to build it, you have to look at digital infrastructure for Metaverse pretty much like you look at roads and highways in the country, right? Will that kind of a shift really happen at size and scale? I think therefore I said it requires a lot of discussion. It's also complex to build, let's face it, because, there are different triggers, different technologies, standards, as we see, which evolve with new businesses in new areas. And there will be countries that will, look at it differently. So there are issues also in terms of development. I mean, a Chow talked of Roblox, but there are so many development tools, not only at the top end, at the, middle end. There will be multiple factors that will drive that, different investor clans, as we call them today, and the world is divided, right? There is technology money coming from the West, there's technology money coming from different parts of the world. Who's going to own that for the future? So these are challenges that are going to exist, in the world as we see this Metaverse journey particularly play out. But I think, therefore, it is important to navigate it in a manner that works for the communities that you're looking at addressing with what you're trying to address. That's our approach, when we look at it from a business angle. And I think this is our advice and suggestion that we give also when we interact with, other stakeholders in the ecosystem, that let's see what difference can this make for a particular kind of community, and really see what's that value add, why are we doing it, who are the people who can make that happen. Like Shah was saying, virtual worlds, gaming companies already creating that. Can we do these for some of the right outcomes, which could make a much far, deeper social impact rather than, only entertainment. I think all of these are discussions that are happening, but, they will only play out over a period of time.
No, absolutely. And in fact, I tend to agree with you that with your optimism, because I mean, we ourselves have a family foundation called NES. And for the last 15 years, we've been doing something called the Innovation Awards, where we really reach out to small colleges across the country and ask them to come up with innovative ideas using technology for India. And Dr. Mashelkar actually presides over that function, and Amay Mashelkar chairs the jury. And we've always been excited to find some of the best ideas coming in from people who have not as much access to technology as the rest. So I think clearly there is a kind of a homogenizing factor there that's at play. But one further question to both of you. And by the way, if any of you in the audience have a question, just raise your hand. I mean, I'm not there physically, but Shilpa is, and she will make sure that your question gets answered. But one final question before I throw it open to any other audience questions is there an issue of, we all talk about ethical AI and issues like that. So is there some possibility that people who are so immersed in the metaverse experience might get just lured away by virtual demons, if you will? So do you see any ethical, moral, virtual issues that are at play when we talk about moving away from the real world and old world family values and everything else to something which is fairly uncharted territory? So Chow, you first, and then maybe Rajan. What do you think? Is there going to be a negative impact on civilization? You're on mute, Chow.
Yeah, look, there certainly is, right? And I think with every advances of technology, it can always be used for good or evil. And the metaverse is no different. I believe that Facebook Horizon World, when they first launched it, within a matter of a week, there was a reported virtual groping, right? For example, and that was before they were able to turn on an automatic 2-meter radius for every avatar. And look, I don't think you can run away from normal human nature in how people are acting and behaving, whether it's physical or virtual, right? That's not going to change very, very soon. But I think with every technology, it does go through this kind of growth, that maturity curve to really put in the safeguards to be able to help have a more just, more social, more ethical, more safe, engaging kind of environment. And I think we will get there. I think certainly from a moral, also from a, I guess there's a duty of care standpoint that, for example, I'm a designer myself, and when we design metaverse experiences, we are committed to not create experiences that trapping people inside such an immersive, engaging thing, for example. So there's a duty of care, just like you would with any other profession, that you are not creating a situation where there's addiction, where there's withdrawal from real life. Because like I said, in reality, the business value of the metaverse is as much outside of the virtual immersive worlds as it is inside. And I think we need to be more creative, more innovative in how to create these kinds of solutions that enhances people's daily in real life experiences, rather than just think about metaverse as an online experiences only, right? Because if you think about it, the internet today, we don't just engage with the internet for, just on the screen, but we are engaging the internet to help find our way around the world, talk to people, communicate with doctors, ordering food, all these things. So these are the kind of interactive things that are enhancing our daily life. And I think the metaversal experiences with this immersiveness ability is just another medium, another paradigm of that. Yeah.
Oh, absolutely. Rajan, what do you think? I mean, the impact of metaverse and all the crazy stuff you're doing on civilization.
No, so I think I completely agree with Shah, because you come to think of it, right? Any activity you currently do in the physical world, think about it, you can do it in a virtual world, right? So it affects everything. It affects your social interactions, it affects your entertainment, it affects your livelihoods, your common, every single thing, right? Now in the physical world, if you just think about it, you have certain laws, right? Your laws of gravity that keep you on ground. In a virtual world, you can be flying around, you can kill people. I mean, it's only your imagination that limits you, right, Ganesh? Like you were talking of an avatar, and we try and create avatar experiences that are very real to the real world. So we will have an avatar walking, in an area, picking a shoe that they like, not a branded shoe. Some creator in some village has created it. And then we say, okay, you want it in your physical world, we'll get a 3D printer just on the other side of the room, actually print it and you wear it, right? And you can see the interactivity and the alliance between a virtual world, where you don't have inhibitions. You're not worried about walking into a store here and a salesperson yelling at you because you looked at too many shoes. Right now, we've seen that people go to Amazon and buy because they have that experience. Here, you're trying it on, you're looking at it, you've got your friends commenting on it, you've got all of that happening virtually. And then that product gets delivered to you, right, through a 3D printer wherever you're sitting. And that's the beauty, right? I'm just giving you the way. So as long as we are working within those limits of a physical virtual world that is somewhat correlated, I think we have opportunities to control, the world on many things, on ethics, on laws, because like the underlying digital economy, the good part is very stable, right? At least as of today, right from Bitcoin, we see the blockchain, the economy, the economic crime, if you were to say, that it's a different thing. Even here, someone can steal your money or steal that. There, you steal that code, right? I mean, you forget the code or something like that. But the idea is that there will be challenges everywhere, but we'll have to figure out how this plays out. The worry to me, really, Ganesh, is that, as what Chow said, right? There is this deep internet, dark internet world. Every technology has these challenges. And how does it get used in the negative is something that I don't think any of us can even understand and fathom today, right? Especially when it comes. So the only way is, as soon as it comes up, you find a solution, right? Like what Chow was talking about, proximity to avatars. We realized that was a real issue. It was affecting the mental health of people who were sitting in the physical world when they were being compromised in their virtual world. And one realizes that the identity or the identification with the virtual and the real is so close, or it's literally the same. And how do you become sensitive to that? So I think it will take time for the world also to acknowledge that, to be able to appreciate that, then to be able to take action around that. So, these are things that worry, I think, all of us, and it should, when this happens. But I said, good part is a little bit of correction, this FOMO effect dying down is getting people to now think through all of these things far deeper, than I think was happening, say, 6 months or a year ago.
I do want to share one very optimistic view that I have about the humanistic opportunity of the metaverse. I think we're at a cusp of a kind of paradigm and technology that allows for unlimited human expression, right? If you think about the gender spectrum, for example, I believe that there's multiple kinds of personality spectrums, right? And the metaverse actually allows one physical individual to have multiple kinds of ways of expressing themselves. And this is quite a profound freedom of expression to the very letter of the words, actually. Like, I can dress up whoever I like, whatever I like, look like whatever. I could be an animal if I like. And that is quite an intriguing point in time in humanistic kind of development on how do we express ourselves to each other, to the world. I think there will be a range, like we each will have different kinds of identities, like pseudonyms, right? Some are completely anonymous pseudonyms. Some are very lifelike. I want to create a lifelike version of Chow in a metaverse where I could deal with legality of owning digital asset, but then I want to completely be hidden. I want to enjoy myself in a completely different way with friends, role playing in a completely different way. So I think that opportunity for human expression is a profound kind of enabler that I haven't seen any other technology that's done that in the last 20, 30, 40 years, right? So that's what I'm looking forward to, is building that kind of capability for future users to really, truly express themselves. Yeah.
So I hope, Chow, you're not recommending that all of us will become schizophrenics with 6 different personalities coming in and different.
Not at all. But I'm sure we can relate somewhat, right? We go through phases even in a day. That to me, it's a bit of a natural human kind of side effects.
Okay, folks, I'm really sorry. I don't think we have time for audience questions, but if any of you have a question, just
Yeah.
let me know and we will happily take it up because we really have
Dr.
only.
Ganesh, Dr.
Yeah.
Ganesh, I'm sorry to interrupt, but
Ah.
we have a gentleman who's been waiting
Oh,
patiently.
yeah, sure. Please ask that.
So we'll take one question
Yes,
as
yes,
good luck
please. Yeah, please.
to start off the day. If you could
Yes.
please identify yourself, be brief in your question, no statements, please, so we have time for the speakers to respond. Thank you.
Thank you so much. This is Girindra Kasmarkar. And first of all, great session and very timely, I must say. I've been in the tech industry, Indian tech industry for the last 3 decades. And as all of us have seen, every time there has been a global shift of, paradigm in the tech, Indian tech industry has thrived and flourished. So if it was in the late 90s, it was internet, then, we became the services destination for the world. When it became mobile technology that came up, then the Indian B2C mobile apps came up very strongly because of the population and consumption story.
Really go ahead and ask your question.
Yes. So what is Web3 going to do for us? What is that opportunity that we look forward to in Web3 for not just leapfrogging, but as Dr. Mashelkar has famously said, for pole vaulting? What is the opportunity for the Indian tech industry with Web 3.0? Thank you.
Okay, so Rajan, would you like to comment and maybe I'll just close it out with my own answer to that? Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, sure. I think, and that's why, I talked about that opportunity that, is so relevant for India, right? I mean, like any of the other aspects of technology, I think it's our talent pool, right? I mean, Indian talent today, as we know, has not only shaped every single large company that is there, but is today also leading, a large part of the technology companies globally. So I think we are at that point where we do have an opportunity to create a product-led kind of an environment and ecosystem coming out of India where value creation really happens, on the product side with Indian companies. And I think this entire wave we have seen of, new age entrepreneurs, etc., and using Indian talent to make that happen is probably the big opportunity today, at least the way I see it, and a lot of others, are also seeing it in India, both from a business as well as government side. I think the second big part is that we have the demography here, right, which will use this technology and actually probably make it more meaningful for the rest of the world. And I think that, again, is a big opportunity for India, especially when it comes to Metaverse. Because, like you say, your clinical trials for something is somewhere here. It is, whether it is the businesses and the brands that are using this as experiences because their future consumers and their current consumers are also there, as well as, the consumers that are going to be there generically, for that, your favorite second life consumption, is also sitting here. So I think both of these put together. And third, really, I think the future global investor interest in India. I mean, today, if we see the world and the way, India's position in the world is shaping up, I have no doubt in my mind that India will be the forefront of a large number of things that will happen in the future. But this is our opportunity to create a global 100 company or many global 100 companies of the future using Metaverse probably as the base. So I think, again, it's a paradigm shift in the thinking from the earlier 2 generations that, the guest referred to. But I think this is the opportunity as I see.
Chow, I'll give you 30 seconds.
Look, I think Web3 is a collection of a lot of things. I think just like it's one element of contributing to the future of the metaverse, it is important on this notion of decentralized ownership and interoperability. I think it's a necessary piece that allows us to really move forward in a positive way. Yeah.
Absolutely. And thank you so much. And I mean, I think Rajan has been using the word FOMO many times. So I think, the fear of missing out is always there with young kids. But don't forget, for many of us in this audience, there is also something called JOMO, which is the joy of missing out. So we've been happily sitting back and saying, oh, metaverse is for the kids. But you do that at your own peril. I mean, as you heard in this panel, and you've seen how much we've enjoyed ourselves talking about metaverse, I think it's important for us to understand new technology, embrace new technology, and who knows, use it to change the world. So with that, thank you very much, Rajan. Thank you very much, Chow. It's been an absolute pleasure. And back to you, Shilpa.
Thank you.
Dr. Natarajan. Thank you very much. I hope you're hearing the applause from the audience here, sitting here in the hall. Thank you to our speakers as well for your valuable time and participation in this session.